Hello and welcome to Dynasty 365 on Fantasy and Frames. I'm Justin Taylor at JT Orange on Twitter or the X. I'm jumping as your host tonight. We have a few guys, 4th of July tomorrow. A bunch of people got family stuff going on, getting caught. So I'm jumping in tonight to kind of help out. I got my guy Rich and our guest, the Joey Wright here. We're going to talk Dynasty strategies. So stick with us here on Fantasy and Frames. Guys, thanks for being with me tonight. Just to jump in here, talk about all this Dynasty stuff. It's we're in that little bit of dead time. Beginning of July, draft's over. We're still kind of in draft. Everybody's kind of making that switch from Dynasty to Redraft, trying to look at that. But we're going to talk about Dynasty strategies and just kind of startups. Like, hey, if you're in a Dynasty league, what do you like? What do you not like for all those guys? People that are, if you're in a league, you want to get some ideas about how maybe to adjust your league, some things you haven't thought about, or if you're looking to get into a league or start a league, maybe some of the things that you might want to consider, because I know when I started my first Dynasty league, I had no idea what I was doing. And there was a ton of stuff I had to fix later on because I was just like, oh, I never thought of that. And then every question that could come up came up, and I wasn't prepared as a commissioner. I didn't have anything written down. So we're going to go through all that stuff to kind of help you hopefully avoid those pitfalls if you're one of those guys coming up in the future. First, before we get into that, Joey, thanks for coming on tonight. Kind of tell everybody where you're from, all the stuff you do, and introduce yourself to all those folks out there listening to us here on Dynasty 365 tonight.
Yeah, I'm with Football Guys. I'm the community ambassador. I am running the Discord, saying hello to you on Twitter, just over there building the community up and doing all things to make fantasy fun. Over at Football Guys, I'm also the host of Sunday Morning Live once the season rolls around. So you're starting sit questions every Sunday from 11 until 12:30. And then I'm over at Front Yard Fantasy every Thursday at 3 o'clock Eastern time for the Fantasy Football Game Show over there with Simon Grunewald and JL Garofalo, having a great time. But tonight, I'm here to have fun with you guys and talk about some Dynasty strategies. So I'm looking forward to it, guys.
I appreciate it. Rich, how about you jump in there and tell us a little bit about yourself?
Oh, sure. Well, nobody ever asked about
long walks on the beach, those types of things. Like let the people know.
Right. No, so you can find me on Twitter at Rich Sickles GBM. That's Ginger Beard Man. I am the Ginger Beard Man. I've been working at Fantasy and Frames. Kind of got a little bit going on over at Alpus Fantasy that just started up. And then other than that, I mean, this is pretty much where you can find me weekly is Dynasty 365, and then tomorrow on the draft show with Stacey Perez and the gang. So, yep.
Fantastic. Let's dive into it here. If you're getting ready to start a league, guys, and the biggest thing I have a problem as a commissioner, collecting the funds. How do you get the funds? How are you not running people down? Do you guys, when you're looking at year to year, do you take the money up front? Do you wait till the end of the season and pay dues out? Are you guys a fan of, collecting it personally? Do you like to use an online, money collector? I'll start with you, Joey. Kind of, are there things you prefer, things you've done in the past that worked well, didn't work well?
Yeah, so I've kind of gone at it at every angle. And so I've kind of learned from mistakes made. I think in a startup, let's just speak directly on a startup, get 2 years up front. It's the safest thing. That way you see if somebody's like, you know what, I don't want to pay 2 years up front. That might not be somebody you want in your Dynasty League. Dynasty Leagues, one of my coworkers over at Football Guys, Dave Kluge, says when I join a Dynasty League, it's a blood commitment. That's how you have to look at a Dynasty League. You're in it to win it, but you're in it for the long haul as well. So any Dynasty League, I want 2 years paid up front. And if you're going to make any trades, you got to pay for the following year as well when you're making the trades for.
Absolutely.
Yeah, what do you think, Rich? I'm in that same boat. I agree. If you can't commit to 2 years, then I don't know if you should be in a Dynasty League. And it again, I found it helps if you do have to fill that orphan. You got that second year, you can like keep that money. You be like, hey, I got a year for you up front. It kind of eases the pain for someone trying to jumping in there. Rich, are you kind of in that same boat?
The 2 years up front, I typically don't do. As the commissioner for a couple of dynasty leagues, I typically I'll get the first year up front right away for sure, and then if anybody makes any trades, especially first round picks, like I make sure that that's in our rules that you got to pay for those up front. But I like to give a little bit of leeway just because I know some people are a little bit strapped. And to be fair, most of the drafts that I have where I'm the commissioner, I know everybody that's in them, so I'm not like concerned about what they're going to do and whatnot. But no, you do bring up a good point about it as far as like it's a blood pack. Like you got to be in it for the long haul. A dynasty is not something that is over in a season. Obviously, like you want to be there. You want to make sure that whoever is coming with you is actually going to hang out with you for the long haul of it. So
absolutely.
Yeah, I have a league that's a real big money dynasty league, and it's the only league I don't collect in advance. And the only reason I don't is because I know everybody. We have a personal inline draft, and I just don't feel comfortable holding the money all year from everybody. So I collect it actually the year after at the next draft. And then that is when I can do payouts for who everybody won, who everybody that owed money from the year before. I can kind of make it work. And so that's one of the only leagues I do it that way. And that's because it's a pretty good amount of change. And so holding on to it for all year, I kind of feel like, I don't need to necessarily do that because I know these guys. I know they're not going to just bail and never pay me. They're going to stay in the league. So, but I do, that's something if you're starting a league, figure out what you want to do and stick with it early, because that is been one of my biggest pains for a lot of my leagues, just collecting the funds and making sure how I'm getting them and keeping track of them. Because I've had a lot of leagues I think I won and I ended up with less money than when the league started because I just didn't get everybody's money from them or keep track of everything well. So I know a couple guys, my buddy John McGlynn that I do the Dynasty Evaluation show with, he has someone in the league that's not him be the secretary, like treasurer, and kind of handle all that for him on the side. And then what he does is he pays for all their drinks at the live draft. He's like, I'll pay for all your stuff. You handle the money for me. And I was like, man, that's a great idea as the commissioner. Like have someone that's their only thing they have to worry about is the money. I'm like, that's something I need to start implementing in my leagues. I just thought that was a pretty cool idea I'd never thought of before.
Yeah, having a secretary is not a bad idea at all. Like that's totally a viable. Let's have a cabinet. Who else can we get into this, right?
Yeah, exactly. How far down do we need to make everything?
Department of Defense, yeah.
Right, yeah. Make it to the point where you're just sitting there. Everybody else does everything for you.
Well, yeah, I guess take as much off your plate as possible. So that makes sense. What about this? Is something I absolutely did not think of whatsoever when I started a fantasy football league, and it came back to bite me. And I learned, oh man, I gotta start making these decisions quick. And that's a league constitution. Do you guys have most of your dynasty leagues? Do you have a written out league constitution that everybody can find? Go, Joey. What do you? How about you in your leagues?
It's kind of funny, like a little bit of the difference between like I know all the guys in my leagues. The ones that I don't really know the people in the leagues, there's really I don't think there have many constitutions out there. However, my friends that I've known since I was 16 that I love and trust, you better believe we have a constitution, because this is what keeps you from falling out of friends or family. I was in a league where there was a huge blow up, 2 lifelong friends over money because there was no constitution. I think you can have people pay at the beginning of the season or pay at the end. That's one or the other. But I absolutely think if you are going to have a true blue dynasty league you're going to keep for a very long time, you need to draft up a constitution. Just put it in Google Docs so everyone has a link to it and they can read it at all times. Have every rule, every amendment. Have a league history in there. It makes everything so smooth. And if you're the commissioner, having a league constitution is a lot of work on the front end, but it saves you so much work on the back end. So absolutely, I think having a league constitution is a fantastic idea.
Yeah. How about you, Rich, on that? Because I'm going to throw my 2 cents here at the end as someone who totally blew this in the early going. But what do you
Right.
think?
Yeah, no, I think they're vital. It's something that was relatively new to me in the last 5 years or so, and as soon as I started having one, I was like, oh, this makes everything so much easier. Like somebody has an issue, and you're like, just go check the bylaws.
Yep.
Like it takes things off your plate. It makes things a lot easier. And personally, what I like to do is I like to make it so that the rest of the league it's something that everybody votes on. Like when I'm starting up a league, I feel like I'm being super annoying to everybody, but I'm like, you're all voting on this because you're going to agree to what our bylaws are so that you can't argue with me later on. Why are the bylaws the way that they are? Like that, yeah, that makes all the sense in the world.
Yeah, I love that idea. When I started my leagues originally, I just kind of like, this is what we're doing. And I kind of threw them together. And again, because I didn't run down the gauntlet of everything that could happen, I'm the one stuck trying to make these decisions at the end of the season. Like, okay, who wins this random tiebreaker that's like 5 things down because we didn't have, it written anywhere. And then I'm the bad guy. Somebody's mad at me. And then, serious players, they hate taking voting in season on anything. They're like, why are we doing this during the year? So I think you're right. You got to like vote that stuff right up front, get it down, and having that to go back and just say, yeah, right there it is. See right there, that's the paragraph that you're asking about is so much better because then you're not the bad guy as the commish, like, oh, you're screwing me over. You like that person more than me. So that's why you're making this decision. It's like, hey, take all that out of it, take all the emotion out of it. It's like, that's just what's on our viral. It's right there. And that will save you a ton of time if you're someone starting a new league, because that's something I had all kinds of issues with over the last decade where I didn't have that stuff. And like the most random things would come up that I wouldn't think about. And I'm like, now I'm just having to make a decision. And I'm like, who's going to be pissed? Who's quitting the league because I'm making this decision? So yeah, as a commish, take all as much of that out as possible because you do not want to have to make those decisions whatsoever. Because like you said, Joey, you never know when it's like, what's the one thing that's going to break a league? What's the one thing that's going to get two friends really heated at each other? And it's like, sometimes it's the most random thing, right?
I remember being in a grocery store and I remember picking up the ribs and getting a text from my friend, like, why was this trade allowed? And because it wasn't in the Constitution that there was no exact trade deadline on Sunday mornings that people could trade, and there was no trade veto, because that is one thing. Like, I veto the veto. Don't have a veto. Commissioner's the commissioner. But I had 2 friends that were like, they no longer in the league. Both of them out. Huge shouting match. Everyone else in the league that didn't know them, super uncomfortable. A Constitution would have fixed all of that. And believe me, the next season we did have a Constitution.
Yeah,
that's the one thing. Those problems will, like, you're like, oh,
Yeah.
I totally missed that. I should do that. So yeah, I don't have this on the list, but since you brought it up, let's talk about the veto. Let's talk about a veto as a commission, a dynasty league. I'm team no veto. As a commish, I usually leave it where I have to approve it just to make sure everything's good and nothing got like wonky. And like, if there's something that looks real strange, I'll like call each owner and I'll be like, hey, what's the deal? And just so if anyone asks me, like, how could you let that go through? I'm like, hey, this is what they want to do. Because I'm in the boat. I think people should be able to run the team the way they want. Like, if you think this guy is more, you want that guy more than this other guy. I don't care what every fantasy site says. You want that guy more. Okay, you should get him. But it's just you just never know how people want to take it. But I also, the only reason I don't just automatically send it through is I have seen collusion in leagues, and so I just want to make sure nothing, like, if it's really weird, I want to talk to the owners before I send it through. Rich, what do you talk? Veto issues, things that you've had? Do people want vetoes in your league? They want a league vote? I've never been in a league where league-wide votes on trades goes well. How about you?
Yeah, no, I'm team no veto. I to be honest, for the most part, with the with the leagues that I've been in and whatnot, we haven't had any issues with any kind of possible collusion or anything like that. I have in one league been accused of some collusion because my trade was not good enough in their eyes. But at the same time, I sat there and explained, I was like, hey, listen, your value might not be where my value is at, but this is what I'm valuing the guy at. Like I'm not trying to work anybody over or anything like that. It's just this seemed like it was a good idea to me. So and I can see that from other people's perspectives too. Like I can see that from somebody else. They see a player that they really want. They're gonna pay what they have to get, what they have to do to get it. And that's what it really comes down to, is a lot of times I think that people really love a certain player and they're willing to pay up for that player. And everybody else doesn't like the fact that they're paying up for it, but it's like, hey, they wanted them. Like that's what we're here for. We're here to have fun. Like let the guy have fun. Let the guy or gal, I should say, have fun. You know, like yeah. So yeah, no, I'm team no veto unless it's an absolute, like unless it's something like I see them make a trade and then a few weeks later they're making the same trade back again. Then we'll have a conversation at that point.
Yeah. I think in Dynasty, the trading is much more gray. Like you can make a case for reasons you do stuff. You pay up for players. You want to play for the future. There's a lot of reasons. I do think in redraft though, and I know we're not talking about redraft today. There's kind of black and white with that. And I'll say that I've never vetoed a trade, but you can sure as bet I've kicked somebody out of a league. If I see somebody taking advantage of another manager that's just learning the game, because part of something I like doing is playing with people I've never played before, who maybe have never played fantasy before. Bring them into fantasy, teach them about fantasy football, let them catch the bug like I did. I don't want some, I don't know if I can, I almost cursed. Good thing I didn't. I don't want some jackhole in my league taking advantage of the new guys, because then they won't have fun and they won't want to play. So once again, I've never vetoed a trade, but I sure as heck have kicked players out of leagues.
Yeah, I'm one of those. If I got a new guy in my league that hasn't played very much, I'm like, hey man, bounce trades off me. I'm not gonna try to steal your trade. If you come in and ask me for something and you're like, hey, this guy's offering me this, do you think this is kind of fair? Especially if it's a new guy in my league, I'm like, yeah, man, I'll like go ahead and tell me what you think. I know it's a little bit iffy. I don't usually do that with guys once we're like on the move in a league, but like if they're newer guys, I'll be like, hey, I'll try to, give you a good idea of what that's going for. If somebody wants to ask me value, like I'm in a 2 QB league, that quarterbacks are like gold. And so it's always like, hey, what's this backup quarterback for this guy worth? Because in a regular league, it's like, whatever, nothing, 5th round rookie pick. But like in some of these leagues, it's like, hey man, if your guy goes down, you're like, your season's over. Like you got to get that guy's backup. And so it might be worth a 2nd or a 3rd round rookie pick, where in certain leagues it's like, that's crazy talk. But in this league, you're like, sometimes you got to pay up for that guy. So that's why I always think too, when I hear people videoing stuff, I'm like, every league's different. Every situation is different. I mean, I've taken my fair share of losses on trades, but I also took the loss on purpose because I was like, hey, I really wanted that guy. I think my team, I'm willing to overpay because I think my team can take it. Where I've had other times I'm like, I got to win this because I'm like in the gutter. My team needs help. Like I've got to get every last piece I can in this. So I think everything, when it comes down to those types of things, I think it's always different. So it's hard to tell. I mean, I know leagues where if I made the same trade in one league and the same trade in a different league, they would be viewed completely different in leagues. So that's why I'm like, there's no set value for me. You can kind of look at stuff, but that's where I see when I see people just like straight out vetoing trades. I'm like, how can you just like veto that unless it's like egregious?
And I think the longer the league goes on, the more trust you have. Like my oldest league, the Golden Gnome League, I'm the commissioner still, and we have that the commission approves trades, and I push every trade through. I don't even look at the trades anymore because those guys, we've been doing this 15 years together now. I know that we're not taking advantage of each other. So I know everything's on the up and up. So yeah, but it's taken a lot of trust and a lot of mistakes to get to that point to where I just like, but even though I would shake my head at some of the trades and like, I wouldn't do it. But I also think the rise of trade calculators in the last 5 years or so, that's helped a lot of commissioners out to where if people think that there's collusion on a trade, you go through in a trade calculator. And a lot of the times, if you look at a trade run through a trade calculator, it's going to come out pretty even. One way or, there's going to be a little sliding scale one way or another, but nothing too egregious. You throw that in the league's face, say, hey, look, this trade's fine. Everyone should pipe down a little bit.
I agree. Let's move on to the next one since I just kind of threw vetoes in on everybody.
No, it's good.
When you guys are starting out, is like for a dynasty, is there a particular roster size you like? I know I'm in leagues that are start 9, I'm in leagues that are start 12. Super flex seems to kind of be what has kind of moved for most leagues. If people are starting dynasty, they go to super flex right off the bat. I've had some leagues I've had to really fight, twist, risks to make people like, hey, let's switch this from a 1 QB to a super flex. We'll start with you, Rich. Kind of what are like the settings, the starting lineup, like that you feel, especially if you're new, if you're starting a brand new one, what do you kind of like to go with?
Sure. Yeah. Personally, my favorite settings is start 10, 1 quarterback, 2 running back, 2 wide receiver, 1 tight end. You got your 3 regular flex, and then I like the 1 super flex just because it actually gives quarterbacks a value. Otherwise, I'm devaluing quarterbacks so much that I typically am just fading them almost altogether. And so I like the start 10, especially with the super flex in there. And I've really gotten into tight end premium lately. I love tight end premium, and I try to push that wherever I can. Just again to raise that value of the other positions that maybe don't have as much value. But yeah, no, that's my go-to is start 10.
What about you, Joey? Any particular amount of starting lineups, whether it's 2 wide receivers, 3 wide receivers, X amount of flex? What do you kind of like?
I think Rich hit it. I like a 10 by 10 league. So a super flex, so it can be 2 quarterbacks if you want it to be, 2 running backs, 2 wide receivers, a tight end, and 3 additional flexes. So that's a wide receiver, a running back, or a tight end that you can put in one of 3 flex spots in addition to the super flex. So that's 10 by 10, 10 on the bench. I like half PPR. I used to be a PPR is gold guy, but I think half PPR is the sweet spot. It's right down the middle. And something I've really liked adding to my leagues is a 0.1 per carry. And all that does is when players are in the end of the game and they're taking a knee, it's a wash. They don't lose points. And because I've been that guy and I've watched it happen to an opponent where you lose on a kneel down. And that's just the worst because it's like, it's not a real play. And I found that doing that 0.1 per carry kind of negates the whole thing because they'll take a negative yard and you give them, so it's like a 0. The player gets,
that's a good idea.
Unless Greg Schiano's across the line and he's running at your kneelers. So
I got a good question for you. How is that not? How does the NFL not change that to a team rushing? Like a kneel down should be team rushing. It should be if you want to count it as a negative yard or negative 2 yards or whatever, shouldn't it go against team rushing? Like when you get sacked as opposed to like that player, that drives me crazy. That's my biggest, this is my rant. That's my biggest pet peeve about college football statistics is when a QB gets sacked, it counts as negative rushing yards for him. I'm like, what? I was like, that should be negative team, like either rushing or passing yards, but it shouldn't be against that one player. That drives me nuts because I've seen you like in ends of games or they're handing off your running back and he's just like trying to run clock, so he stands behind the line as long as he can and gets tackled for a 2-yard loss, and you're like, what are you doing? And then, of course, he's got 101 yards. Now he's got 99. You lose the bonus,
and you needed that 2 yards.
This is a good question. I'm going to bring a question to the table. How do you guys feel about bonuses?
I love them.
Do you?
Yeah.
The reason
I'm a bonus guy too.
I don't like them.
I'm a bonus guy, but I'm also a bonus guy because I want to get as many points out there as possible. And that's probably for my early days of playing fantasy, where I was in so many leagues where you only got points if you scored a touchdown, or you only got points if you had 100 yards rushing, receiving, or 300 yards passing. And you were like weeks where you're winning like 35-32, and it's just like, it's so ugly. So I do like the bonuses. Yeah. I will say with Joey to kind of jump on him, what he said earlier with the 0.1, I've really jumped into like the 0.2 or 0.25 per carry to kind of even out with running backs because I'm open on the 10, 12, 9 starters. I always prefer more starters because I feel like your team needs to be deeper if you have to start more guys. But I also I want positions to matter. You'll never can make them fully equal. You just can't. But I want them to score as close as I can, which is so I'm jumping with Rich. I want tight end premium because I don't want people just to be able to ignore tight end. I want super flex because quarterback's the most important position. All of a sudden in single QB, it becomes very irrelevant for most part for a lot of leagues. So you're like, oh, how's the most important position? Not guys going in the 12th round. So that drives me crazy. So anything I can do to try to make it. So I've noticed lately I like the first downs and I like to add some kind of carry, like points per carry, just because we see so little bell cow running backs now that I want to see those guys. And plus here's what the reason I like it too is you get that third down back that gets that 4 or 5 handoffs a game. He gets a couple catches a game. That guy's playable. He's not going to score you a lot unless something crazy happens, but he's a playable guy. And then those rushing and receiving, rarely are those guys going to get you 100 of either, but those combined yards help you because you're getting, I'm getting catch, I'm getting a rush, I'm getting receiving yards. And so I that's the only reason I kind of jumped in that a little bit, but I have been a few leagues with the tiered receiving. And I'm kind of coming around to the tiered receiving, like the half, 1.1.5. So I do kind of, that's my favorite thing about fantasy football. You can mix it up. Every league's different. So that's not the same. If it was all the same, I wouldn't like it as much. But that's why I always tell people, how can you be in so many leagues? Because they're all different. And the scoring's different. The strategy's different. That's why I like them. Yeah. Anything else you guys got on that topic before we move on?
No.
Okay. So this is one that, I know how most people will say, but we'll see what you guys say. If you're starting up, or if you're doing a startup, do you do pre-NFL draft, post-NFL draft? What type of year, if you're going to do a dynasty startup? And I really want to hear you guys answer because I've done a bunch in the last year and the difference in time frame of when you started that startup, where guys are going is insane. So we'll start with Joey. Kind of is there a prime spot if you're going to do a new dynasty startup? I know it's hard to get everybody together, but is there a time that you think is hey, this is the best time to probably do one?
So I'm going to say I like drafting before and after the NFL draft. So I'm going to play both sides of the fence here. I like doing a startup veteran draft before the NFL draft. We kind of know what these veterans are going to be for the most part. We're all watching it. We've all decided, hey, we were maybe at the Super Bowl. Let's start a dynasty league next year. Okay. Next week, let's do a draft. Maybe not next week, but maybe 2 weeks, maybe in a month. Let's do our veteran draft. And then since I don't play with kickers at all anymore because kickers are not real people, I like using the kickers as placeholders for those NFL draft spots. So after the NFL draft is when I like to draft my rookies. I do not like drafting a rookie not knowing the team they're going to be on. There are sickos out there, hi Jeff Bell, that love drafting rookies before you know where they're going to go. That's not me. I want to know the landing spot. I want to know what their potential is. I don't like going in completely blind with some of these rookies. So veteran draft before the NFL draft, and then a rookie draft after the NFL draft, and use kickers as the place spot.
What do you think, Rich? Is that kind of where you're lining up, or do you got something different up your sleeve?
Right. I like that actually. No, I didn't even think about the startup versus the rookie draft, and I should have, since this is a startup podcast that we're talking about right now. But no, Joey nailed it. I think that's a lot of my startups are early on. I like the season winds down and you're sitting there, what are we going to do now? Let's do a startup. Why not? Let's have a little fun in our lives. And then wait for that rookie draft until I'm with Joey. I'm not a masochist. I like to wait until things actually kind of line up and I have an idea of where guys are at. And I totally understand the argument too of waiting until closer till camp starts or until after camp starts. Like I get that, wanting to know what rookies are actually going to be impactful versus which rookies are we hoping are going to be impactful. Personally, I like to start off with them closer to the NFL draft and not so much towards the rookie, or not the rookie camp, but the training camp in general, just because I like to see where is my evaluation of a player versus the evaluation of the rest of the league. I like to see where they're actually. I like to challenge myself a little bit, you know. But at the same time, like I do get that wanting to wait until camp starts. It's a big argument in several of my leagues that we deal with. Luckily this year we won the battle, and we had the draft early. So
Good job.
I'm one of those. I'm with Joey on that. I'm in a couple leagues that did the rookie with the startup draft before they actually were drafted. And I was just losing my mind. I'm like, why did I sign up for this league? I'm like, this is crazy talk. Because I'm like, you have no idea where these guys are going to land. Guys going way up, way down, depending on where they ended up going in the real. I want to know where guys are going in the real NFL draft. I understand, like, maybe doing the draft after that happens and going, okay, well, we don't know where they're going to be on the depth chart, but you know what team they're on. And you have a general idea. But I did one draft startup this year. It was like in February, and it was like a C2C, and we started I bet you it was a week or two after the season started. And man, my draft in that league I do not love. I think I took Justin Fields in the second round. I was still on the Justin Fields train. He was going to start for the Bears. They weren't going to take Caleb Williams. And if he wasn't, he was going to get traded somewhere where he was going to start immediately. And I'm looking at that league and I'm going, I don't have a second quarterback in that league. It's a brand new startup. And somehow I don't have a second quarterback in that league. So, and that was the one also that we drafted rookies with it. So I didn't know where any of these JJ McCarthy, I didn't know where, any of those guys, Drake May was going to go. And so, that team is going to need some work now. It's a mess. I don't mind doing the NFL before. If you're going to do a startup, like Joey said, I actually don't mind that at all. I don't like including rookies in that, though. I'd almost rather you do it, and then whoever had the last pick in the startup gets the first pick of the rookie draft, or some kind of lottery system to make it work. I do not like drafting rookies, especially when you don't know what team they're on, with the veterans. That bothers me. I'm like, gotta have some kind of separation on that. Next thing we're going to talk about here. Let's talk about, when you guys are going in this strategy wise, now we're talking about we're going to stick with startup strategy here. Do you guys change it up? Do you stick with the same strategy all the time? Is it one of those, because you're thinking, hey, Dynasty, I want to kind of go young as I possibly can? Is it a mixed squad? Do you kind of go, hey, everybody else is going to draft young, I'm going to draft veterans, I want to win right away? Is there what kind of strategy do you got to kind of go in with, Rich?
Yeah, so and I think this actually kind of points to the last question a little bit, as far as where you like to do things, because I mean, when it comes to fantasy football, we're all in it to have fun, right? Like that should be the key point. But also, you're in it to win. Like I want to win that league that I'm in, and so I typically will value veterans more than I will value the rookies, because I just don't know where rookies are going to land. I don't know what they're actually going to do when they come out. What rookies are going to have a slow roll in building up into being where they're going to be at in the end of things, and so a lot of times I will put that value on the veterans much more than what I will put on the rookies. So yeah, I'm an immediate contender. Like that's what I want to do when I'm coming into a league. It's a little tough sometimes. You see that all those rookies going off the board. You see the rookie picks going off the board, and you're just like, oh no, I'm missing out. But at the same time, you gotta stick with what you know. Go with those veterans.
Yeah. How about you, Joey? Do you mix it up? Do you kind of lean one way more than the other?
I am drafting any dynasty team to win within 3 seasons. So because of that, I am taking some young guys, but I'm also taking some veterans. I will never let veteran value pass me by. Often we'll see somebody like Devontae Adams sitting there in the 6th, 7th round. Eventually, I'm going to be the guy that grabs him because the value is just too good at that point. But I do let age be the determining factor between like a tiebreaker between two players. So my team is, I don't have the youngest team in the league, but I definitely have the oldest team in the league. I want to win within 3 years. And then at that 3-year mark, I'm either going to tear it down or try for another championship. So that's kind of how I like to play. I found success with it. And I don't mean this in any negative way, but I remember I said that like David mentioned it's a blood oath when you join a dynasty league. If you play to win within 3 years, sometimes these dynasty leagues fold. I'm in it to win it. And so if I think the league might fold, maybe I'm going to make that push to win that year. That's kind of a cheeky way to play, but listen, we want to win.
Yeah, I agree with you guys. I'm really in that 3-year window, like Joey said. I'm like, I want to be able to know where I'm at in that window and go, okay, I messed up. Like all these guys are bad. I'm not going to win it. I got to tear it down or I got to do something different. I definitely go different strategy. And this probably is because I'm in too many leagues, to be honest with you. So there's sometimes I'm in leagues where I'm like, I'm just going young. I get my mindset and I'm like, I'm just going to go young in this league. And I'm going to maybe struggle the first year or two, but I could really roll this league for a couple years in a row if I hit it right and I make the right draft picks. But I'm with you guys. Like I've had leagues where I'm like, I think I'm going to go young. And then I start just seeing all the older players fall and they fall and they fall. And it's like everyone who's like 27 to 30, people are just avoiding like the plague. And I'm like, all right, I'm going to take every one of these. The next thing I know, I'm like, I got Cooper Kupp, I got Keenan Allen, I got Devontae Adams. I'm just like, I'm taking everybody because like nobody else wants it. I'm like, I'll take all these guys. So I definitely think on top of the strategy, I always tell people, make sure you're on your toes because like everybody has a strategy going in. If everyone else is trying to do the same strategy as you, sometimes you got to pivot because it's not going to work depending on where you're drafting. If you're at the end of a round and everyone's decided, hey, we're all going young and you're missing out on all the young, new studs, you're like, hey, you might want to say, instead of taking the 12th new young stud, maybe you just take the best veteran that's there. So I always look at that too. And I kind of play off, what's going on in the draft. Cause sometimes I'll end up with a team completely different than what I came in planning the draft. And a lot of it was just depending on where people fell. I just on Twitter the other day, I'm in a draft and somebody was like, what is JT Orange doing? I hadn't taken a wideout in the first 8 rounds of a startup dynasty. They're like, what are you doing? I'm like, it wasn't my plan. I wasn't like, I'm not going 0 wideout. It just, every time it got to me, there was a veteran running back or tight end or someone that was sitting there that I'm like, oh, I like this guy better than the wide receiver options. So I just went with him. And then it was like, I didn't even notice it until they pointed it out. They're like, are you ever going to draft a wide receiver? And I'm like, I should probably start thinking about that. And it really was just because the guys I wanted in every round went right before me. Right. And so then I just was like, well, do I want this other wide receiver or just because I'm drafting a wideout to draft a wideout, or do I want to take the player that I think is a better player? And in some of those cases, it was a running back or a tight end instead of a wide receiver. So you never know what's going to start. That's the best part, though, right? Dynasty startups, you never know how it's going to turn out. So it's always interesting, kind of how that works.
Well, and I think too that there's I don't agree with drafting with the expectation to trade. Like, you see a guy of value and you take that value because you're thinking, oh, well, I can offload that later on for somebody else. But I do believe that there comes a point where you decide, am I actually contending in this league or am I going to be rebuilding here pretty soon? And so that's why veterans don't scare me off, because a lot of times I'll have a veteran that is maybe a little bit on the older side, like Devontae Adams or something like that, and maybe I'm not competing in that league. Well, okay, Let me find who is competing and who needs a wide receiver. Maybe I can offload them on them, try to help myself build out in the end of things. So that's why I really think the veterans, they have a lot more value than the older veterans have a lot more value than a lot of people perceive in Dynasty. The only league that I've gone back to back in is the only league where I have no rookie picks.
So sometimes you got to unload those rookie picks to win. I mean, would you rather have the rookie or would you rather win? I guess that's the question for some people. Speaking of that, when you guys are looking at this Dynasty compared to Redraft, when you're doing this positional wise, is there certain positions that you're like, hey, I gotta lock up this guy, this position first? This is my most important that I'm looking at. Is it a specific position, or are you taking a couple things into consideration, especially at those top of your draft and redraft? What do you think, Joey?
Quarterbacks for me in redraft, I don't value at all. I am notoriously the guy that I usually end up playing quarterback chicken with somebody in the league of who's going to be the last one to take one. And it's usually me. This weekend in Scott Fishbowl, I waited till the 6th round to take my quarterbacks just because I'm like, this is a 1-year league. I want to load up on these tight ends early. And for me, it's just wait on quarterback, even in a super flex league. I think this year I counted, there's 23 quarterbacks. I am 100% fine starting this year, maybe even more. I'm really starting to fall in love with Bryce Young, with Dave Canellis over there, of what he could be doing there in Carolina. But yeah, so quarterbacks for me, I'm not really valuing. Now, this year, specifically in redraft, I want to get one of who I perceive as the top 5 tight ends. I want to walk away from my draft with one of those guys. If I don't, I'm actually a little sad with my teams. I've been looking at my teams. If I don't have a Kelsey, an Andrews, a Kincaid, a Laporta, a McBride, I'm not feeling very good about my team. I need one of those guys. That's just redraft, though. In Dynasty, it could be very, very different.
What do you got, Rich? What's your strategy difference between the redraft and a Dynasty startup? Is there like positions you're eyeing more in that situation, Dynasty compared to redraft?
Sure. Actually, I think it's kind of funny. Me and Joey have the exact opposite take here when it comes to tight end. When I'm in a Dynasty league, I want to have one of those top end tight ends. Okay. I think that the tight end is I think Paul Charchian has done a really good job of explaining why you want to take a tight end early. He's kind of one of the people that I've followed up for a long time, and that I've taken a lot of advice from. And when you're starting one of those top tight ends and you're getting 10 points more than the other person is at that position, that's going to pay off huge in the end of things. And so when I'm in a Dynasty, I want to make sure that I have a tight end that is going to last me through the years. Like right now, Kyle Pitts is my guy, and I'm trying to grab him everywhere that I can. I'm trying to trade for him everywhere that I can. I think that he's going to have a great, like you were saying, Joey, earlier, that there's a 3-year window. He's going to have a great 3 to 4 years with Kirk Cousins throwing him the ball. Yeah. And so I'm
2 of those years with Cousins, but
2 of those years with
I'm just kidding. Like
he's playing the Cousins is gone. Penix will step in.
Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No. But yeah, no. No, I really think that like running backs, they're going to have their value. Wide receivers, they're going to have their value. Quarterbacks, if you're doing super flex, they're going to have their value. But a tight end is something that a lot of people will overlook, and I think that's somebody that you want to have a stud on your team at the position when you're playing Dynasty.
Yeah, like I just want to get guys I think that are going to last. Like, projecting out 10, 12 years in Dynasty is scary. You don't want to really do that. Yeah. But I'm like, if I'm doing a Dynasty startup, I want a guy, and like I said, like Joey said earlier, I want to play that 3-year window, but I want to take those guys high that I think are like 5-6 year studs. Like they've got like RB1, wide receiver 1, tight end 1, QB 1, that they should be in that mix at least half that time, if not more, in that 5-year window. So that's kind of where I'm leaning. And it kind of depends on the guy. If it's a stud running back and he's only 22, I'm going to probably take him a little earlier. If it's a guy that I really like, but he's already 26, to me, I'm going to wait and see if I can get value and they can drop a little bit to me. Because it just, you're like, how many real years are you going to get of that guy? And if I can get 3 out of the running back or 4, great. Wide receiver, I want a little bit more out of if I can get them. And obviously, like you said, Rich, if you can lock up a tight end that you're not going to have to worry about at all, and he's going to be a top 5 guy for, 5, 6, 7 years to come, you got to love that. Because then you just feel like, okay, every draft I go in, every trade I go in, I'm not like looking for that. I'm not having to like reach to find that positional value because I already got the value. And then the nice thing is, if you get lucky and you hit it on the draft, if you got a Kelsey or you got an Andrews, then you turn around and take a Kincaid or a Laporta. Now all of a sudden you're like, oh, I already have my guy that's getting older, but I got my young guy right behind him. And you either can trade the older guy or you can do whatever. So that's always a nice thing. I probably am the one person that goes running back earlier in dynasty drafts than almost anyone else. And that's just because I played running back in high school. I am avid that running backs still matter. It's my own personal like hill I want to die. And I'm like, running backs matter. Like that can't just be any random guy back there. And so I end up taking running back almost always before other people. And that's because I'll just see the value drop and it goes guys that I really like. And I'm like, if you're going to let them drop to me, then I'm going to drop and then I'll figure it out from there. So not that strategy has worked all the time, but it is one of those. If I do see that value, I will kind of, jump on it if I can. As we're coming down here, guys, to the end of the show, give me some of your common faux pas that, maybe newbies, maybe people are making in dynasty, leagues early on when they're just not quite sure what they should be doing. What are some of the things that they do? And then maybe what are some of your suggestions to correct those things? If you, A, what not to do, and then B, if you do them or you have done them, maybe how do you get yourself out of that mix?
Sure.
Joey, I'll let you start, Joey, on this one.
Okay. Yeah. 30 is old for a running back. 30 is kind of old for a wide receiver. 30 is not really that old for a quarterback. Don't let veteran value fall. Like, truthfully, I said it earlier about Devontae Adams, but that goes to the veteran quarterbacks too. If you have a 30-year-old quarterback, it's not as old as it seems. So, right, I think who turns 30 this year? Is Goff just turned 30 last year? I think it was.
I think so, yeah.
Justin Herbert starting to approach there. Trevor Lawrence starting to approach there. And those are still younger guys. And I think their best seasons are ahead of them. They are falling in dynasty drafts past the first 12 quarterbacks. Don't let veteran quarterback value fall. Just don't let it happen. Be the guy that takes those quarterbacks.
Yep. Yeah. You absolutely nailed it. And I'm just going to say right off, that's exactly what I had written down in my notes. Like I got nothing else to add to that one because that's exactly it. Like I know we all want to be, when it comes to dynasty, you want to be younger and everything like that. You want to last, you want a team that's going to last for a long time. But like Joey said earlier, you never know when a team's going to or when a league's going to fold. Like that 3-year window is what you should be aiming for. And so if you can get a Lawrence or a Herbert, especially Herbert as late as he's going right now, which is just crazy to me, blows my mind. Like, don't let that value fall. Grab them.
Yeah, I would say the same thing. Super flex. If you're a new dynasty startup, do not mess around with QB. Make sure you get some guys because I think what's the saying goes, like the best time to get a QB is to draft one. Once they're out there in the open, trying to trade for one is tough, and you're almost always going to overpay. And you're going to have to overpay by a lot, and you're going to have to hope that somebody just has a lot of guys and has other, needs to fill, or is just so loaded that they're like, hey, I'll take all your draft picks for this QB. So especially if you're in 2 QB leagues, I'm in only a couple 2 QB, but quarterbacks are gold in a 2 QB league. I mean, they're absolute gold. So you don't mess around, get those guys. Even if they're not the best of the best, like you guys said, if they're a top 12, top 14 guy, you want to make sure you have that position locked up on your team because you don't want to be the guy just constantly chasing quarterback. Because I've been that, in a few leagues. I have a super flex league where I have Patrick Mahomes and my team should be great. And that's like, I have been for 4 years chasing a second, third quarterback where I'm just trading away my future every year to get like a random QB just to be able to throw in the lineup. And it's like, I'm like just making the playoffs every year, but it's like everything has to go right for me to win it all. And it's hurting my team because I keep giving away all these draft picks that I could have had nice players. And I'm just trading them for like random Ben Roethlisbergers at the end of their career, and random Joe Flacco's at the end of their career. Cause I was like, I got to have somebody to put in that second QB spot, especially if you're in a league that has pretty high QB scoring.
It feels like you almost had to play. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, to Joey's point, maybe you should be looking at Jared Goff. Love him. QB1. He is he's not QB1, but he is a QB1. Grab him. Sorry, Joey, didn't mean to cut you out there.
No, it's fine. I'm trying to remember what I was about to say. Oh man, this just went away. It's off.
It's gone.
No, it's not. No, but but Goff's the guy. I mean, how many years in a row in Dynasty football have we talked about like, hey, here Goff, they're going to draft somebody, he's going to be gone, and then he's not going away. Joey, jump in.
You basically have to play in the toilet bowl to be able to get a competent quarterback in the draft. So unless you're going to finish as one of the last two teams this year, it was Caleb Williams and Jaden Daniels, and not even that's guaranteed. You're going to be facing an uphill battle in these drafts where tight end and running back consistently seem to fall towards the end of that first round. So if you've got a first round pick and it's at the end and you need a tight end or running back, you're probably going to end up with somebody okay. But if you need a quarterback, you're in trouble. So get that value early when you can.
Yep.
Absolutely. That's my also my little. This is why I play Devy, so I don't have to finish last to get the best players. Because I was somebody was just talking about that the other day, and I'm like, how did you get Marvin Harrison and how did you get CJ Stroud? And like, this team is really good. I'm like, Devy, man, drafted him in Devy, so I don't have to finish last to still get good players. But that's a different show for a different day. Don't want to Jorge get me upset at me going off topic here with something totally different. He's like, that's a totally different show, JT. What are you doing? That is about going to do it for us. I appreciate you guys coming on. Big thanks to Joey, special guest, also to Rich making out here as we're getting ready to celebrate our nation's birthday. Like, it's here, guys. 4th of July, right around the corner. My family's all off at fireworks right now. I was like, hey, I'll jump on the pod. Don't worry about it. I've seen plenty of fireworks in my life. Let everybody kind of know where, again, if they missed the opening of the show, Joey, where everybody can find you real quick.
Yeah, I'm over at Football Guys and over at Front Yard Fantasy. Football Guys doing the Sunday morning live every Sunday from 11 to 12:30 once the season rolls around. You can find me on the Football Guys Fantasy Football podcast with Alfredo Brown and Dave Kluge as well. And then the FYF show every Thursday, except for tomorrow at 3 o'clock, playing the Fantasy Football Game Show. And I just want to take like a second. Tomorrow is my wife and I's 20th anniversary of our first date.
Oh, congratulations.
Happy anniversary, hon. So get some brownie points here. Yeah, we've been together for like 17, but like had our first date like 20 years ago. So it's crazy. We have 2 kids
awesome.
now. We're old
impressive.
as hell. So, yeah.
That's impressive.
That is.
Congratulations, you guys.
Thanks.
Rich, how about you, man? Let everybody know where they can find you here on Fantasy Frames and everywhere else.
Yeah, sure. So yeah, you can find me on Fantasy Frames here on Wednesday nights on Dynasty 365. You can find me on Thursday nights on the Draft Show. And then you find me on Twitter at Rich Sickles GBM. That's Rich Sickles Gingerbeard Man. And that's where you can find me.
Thanks again for you guys joining me tonight here on Dynasty 365. Make sure to check out fantasyinframes.com. We've got all kinds of articles there. You can find all our podcasts, YouTubes, all that good stuff. Next after this is 4th and Frames, which is our redraft content. And then later on the night, Shoot the Gap is our IDP show. Me and Jorge are on there for all those crazy IDP freaks. We've got a few shows coming up tonight. So if you're into that, check that out. You can always find me here on Fantasy and Frames on Shoot the Gap. I jump in, help out on the other shows when I can. You can find my show, The Stew with JT Brew, where I do all kinds of gambling content. I talk about a little bit of everything there. And if you're into IDP, I always tell people on DLF, I got my rankings, my top 150, plus my rookie defensive rankings, all kinds of rookie stuff over there that I've written. So you always check me out there as well. I appreciate it, guys. Thanks very much. I hope you guys have a fantastic 4th of July. It was a great show. We'll check you guys next time.